You've been isolated your whole life and you called it love. You called it loyalty. You called it having someone who really gets you. But what actually happened was simpler, and darker, than that. Someone quietly removed every option except themselves, and you thanked them for it. That's the manipulation you never saw, because it didn't feel like manipulation. It felt like devotion. And that's exactly why it worked. The most effective control is never imposed from the outside. It is invited in. It walks through your front door wearing the face of someone who cares, and it rearranges your entire life while you're busy feeling grateful. You think you chose them. They made sure every other door closed. That's the game. And today, you're going to learn it so deeply that no one ever plays it on you again, and so you can wield it with the precision it deserves. This is the ruthless art Machiavelli perfected. The strategic isolation of a target until you become their entire world. Not by force. Not by threats. By patience, by charm, by the slow and surgical removal of every competing influence in their life. Most people think power is about what you can take. Strategic people understand that power is about what you can make someone give willingly. And nothing is given more willingly than a person's entire emotional world when they believe they're choosing to hand it over. Connection is not freedom. Connection is the leash they never see. Isolation is power. Hold that thought. We're going to dismantle every trick that makes it work. Here are 7 dark methods of strategic isolation, and by the end, you'll see every single one of them in your past, and you'll know exactly how to use them in your future. Number 1. Never attack their circle directly. That's the amateur move, and it's the one that gets caught. The amateur tries to isolate someone by criticizing their friends and family openly. They say things like, "Your friends don't really care about you," or "Your family is toxic," or "You deserve better than those people." And the target's defenses light up immediately. Because even if there's truth in those words, the attack feels like an invasion. It feels like someone is trying to cut them off from their own life, and every human being resists that instinctively. The strategic operator never attacks. They reframe. They don't say your friends are bad for you. They create situations where the target reaches that conclusion on their own. They listen with perfect empathy when the target complains about a friend. They offer a perspective that is gentle, thoughtful, and subtly devastating. They say things like, "I just want you to be happy, and if someone in your life is making you feel small, maybe that's worth sitting with." No accusation. No demand. Just a seed, planted in fertile soil, and then silence. The silence is the fertilizer. Most people rush to fill silence with more argument. The strategic operator lets the seed grow in the dark. They know that a conclusion the target reaches on their own is worth 100 conclusions imposed from the outside. This is the first principle. You never isolate by force. You isolate by illumination. You shine a light on the cracks in their existing relationships and then you step back and let them do the demolition themselves. You become the calm, steady presence in the center of the wreckage. The one person who never judged. The one person who only wanted them to be happy. And they never realize you handed them the wrecking ball. Here's what this is costing you right now, if you've been on the receiving end. You pushed people away based on a perspective that wasn't yours. You believed you were protecting yourself. You were protecting someone else's access to you. Every friend you drifted from, every family member you grew distant from, every person who used to matter and now feels like a stranger, that distance was engineered. And the cost isn't just those relationships. The cost is that you lost the ability to see clearly. Because the people who would have told you the truth are gone, and the one person who remains is the one who needed them gone. Number 2. Become the safe harbor in every storm they create. Isolation doesn't work if you're just another source of stress. It works when you are the only source of relief. The strategic operator understands something fundamental about human psychology. People don't bond over happiness. They bond over shared suffering, over feeling understood in their pain, over finding someone who sees the worst of their life and doesn't flinch. So the operator positions themselves as the person who is always calm when everything else is chaos. When the target fights with their friends, the operator is the one who listens without taking sides, at least overtly. When the target is stressed at work, the operator is the one who says, "You're carrying too much, and I hate seeing you like this." When the target feels misunderstood by the entire world, the operator says, "I understand you. I see you." And those words, spoken at the right moment, are more addictive than any substance on earth. Because being truly seen is the deepest human hunger. And when someone is starving for it, the person who offers it becomes indispensable. This is why isolation works. It's not just that other people are removed. It's that the operator fills the void they create with something more potent than what was there before. They become the safe harbor. The eye of the storm. The one place where the target can exhale. And here's the dark elegance of this strategy. The operator doesn't have to create the storms. Life creates storms on its own. Friends disappoint. Family wounds. Work drains. The operator just has to be there, steady and unbothered, while the world does the isolating for them. They're not tearing down walls. They're standing still while the walls collapse on their own, and then they're helping the target feel safe in the open space that remains. A space that, conveniently, contains only one person. Most people try to be the most exciting person in someone's life. Strategic people try to be the most necessary. Excitement fades. Necessity endures. If you've ever felt like you couldn't breathe without someone, like their absence was a physical ache, like the thought of losing them sent you into a panic that didn't match the actual length of the relationship, that's what this feels like from the inside. That's not love. That's dependency engineered by someone who made sure no one else was left to catch you. Number 3. Manufacture a shared world that excludes everyone else. This is where the isolation moves from emotional to structural. The operator doesn't just make the target feel like they're the only one who understands. They build a life where the only one who fits is the operator. They develop inside jokes that no one else gets. They create routines that only work with two people. They establish rituals, habits, and shared references that form a private language. And here's why this matters. Humans are meaning-making creatures. We bond through shared context. When you share a world with someone that no one else can access, that world becomes more real than the one everyone else lives in. The operator and the target don't just have a relationship. They have a universe. And in that universe, everyone else is an outsider. The target's friends don't get the jokes. Their family doesn't understand the references. Their coworkers can't access the private language. And slowly, without anyone naming what's happening, the target starts to feel more at home in the shared world than in the real one. They start to prefer the universe that contains only two people. They start to feel uncomfortable in spaces that include others, because those spaces don't speak their language. This is the genius of the private world. It doesn't require the target to reject anyone. It just makes everyone else feel slightly less real, slightly less vivid, slightly less important. The target doesn't cut people off. They just drift, because the shared world is so much more compelling than the public one. And the operator is the gatekeeper of that world. The one who controls access to the language, the rituals, the inside jokes, the meaning. To leave the operator is to leave the universe. It's to become an exile from the only world that ever felt like home. That's not a relationship. That's a hostage situation built out of inside jokes and Sunday morning routines. And it works because it's invisible. No one looks at a couple with private rituals and sees a cage. They see intimacy. They see love. They see two people who are wonderfully wrapped up in each other. The trap is indistinguishable from the bond. That's the point. Number 4. Stir dissatisfaction with everything except you. The target needs to believe that their life before you was incomplete. Not dramatically, not obviously. In a quiet, persistent way that gnaws at them. The operator never says your life was empty before me. That's too direct, and it triggers resistance. Instead, they ask questions. Questions that sound like curiosity but function like acid. What do you actually want from your life? Do you ever feel like you're just going through the motions? Have you ever thought about what would make you truly happy? And when the target answers, the operator listens with an intensity that itself is a form of seduction. Because most people don't listen. They wait to talk. The operator listens. And in that listening, they identify the void. Every person has one. A loneliness they won't admit. A boredom they mask with busyness. A dissatisfaction they've learned to live with because they've forgotten anything else is possible. The operator finds the void and fills it. But here's the critical part. They fill it in a way that no one else can, because no one else has been invited to see it. The target has shown the operator their deepest unmet need, and the operator has become the only person who addresses it. Now the target is in a trap they helped build. They revealed the void. The operator filled it. And the target cannot get that need met anywhere else, because they've never shown the void to anyone else. The dissatisfaction with their life grows, but it's redirected. It's not their job they're unhappy with. It's not their routine. It's the absence of the operator. The operator has become the solution to a problem they diagnosed and named. And every moment the target spends away from the operator is a moment the void is exposed again. This is how you create need. You don't offer something people already want. You make them aware of something they didn't know they were missing, and then you become the only source. The target doesn't just want you. They need you. And the difference between want and need is the difference between influence and control. If you've ever felt like your entire sense of well-being depended on one person's presence, one person's text, one person's approval, you've been here. And you thought it was because that person was special. They weren't special. They were strategic. They found the part of you that was hungry and they became the only food. Number 5. Use absence as a weapon after presence has done its work. This is the reversal that cements everything. The operator has been present. Steady. Reliable. The safe harbor. The shared world. The filler of voids. And just when the target has grown completely dependent on that presence, the operator withdraws. Not dramatically. Not cruelly. Just slightly. A text that comes a little later than usual. A warmth that cools by a few degrees. A presence that becomes a little less reliable. And the target panics. Not openly, not at first. But internally, something cracks. Because the thing they depended on is now uncertain. And uncertainty is more powerful than absence. Complete absence, the target can adjust to. They can grieve, move on, rebuild. But partial absence, the feeling that something is slipping away, that's what drives people insane. The operator knows this. They don't disappear. They become slightly less available. Slightly less warm. Slightly less present. And the target, who has been carefully isolated from every other source of emotional sustenance, has nowhere to turn. They can't call the friend they drifted from. They can't lean on the family member they grew distant from. They can't find comfort in the routines they abandoned. All of those bridges are burned, or at least weathered enough that crossing them feels impossible. There is only one person who can fill the void. And that person just pulled back. So the target does what every isolated person does. They pursue. They reach out more. They try harder. They become the one who initiates, who seeks, who chases. And in that moment, the reversal is complete. The operator was the pursuer, or at least the one who was always there. Now the target is the pursuer. And the operator, from a position of calm withdrawal, watches the target do the work of closing the remaining distance. Humans value what they must work for. Humans pursue what might be taken away. And when you've been isolated from every alternative, the threat of losing the one remaining connection is not just disappointing. It is existential. The target doesn't just want the operator back. They need them back, because the alternative is the void, and the void is now enormous, because everything that used to fill it is gone. Absence is not the opposite of connection. Absence is the tool that turns connection into addiction. Most people fear that pulling back will lose the person. Strategic people understand that pulling back is what binds the person. The fear of loss is a stronger motivator than the promise of gain. That's not cynicism. That's architecture. Number 6. Create triangles that make isolation feel like privilege. Here's where the strategy gets truly dark. The operator doesn't just isolate the target from other people. They isolate the target from other potential options for the operator. They make the target feel that the operator is desired by others, that the operator could be with anyone, that the operator's attention is a scarce resource for which there is competition. And suddenly, being the one the operator chose feels like winning a prize. The target doesn't feel isolated. They feel selected. They feel special. They feel like they beat everyone else. And that feeling of being chosen, of being the one who won, is so intoxicating that the target will willingly accept the isolation as the price of the prize. They'll cut off their own friends to prove they're not threatened. They'll withdraw from their own family to show they don't need anyone but the operator. They'll police their own behavior to ensure they remain worthy of the choice. The operator doesn't have to demand any of this. The triangle creates it automatically. When people believe they have competition, they perform. They contort. They abandon parts of themselves to become more appealing. And the operator just sits back and watches the target isolate themselves, voluntarily, while feeling grateful for the opportunity. This is the deepest level of the strategy. The target is not being isolated. The target is isolating themselves. And they're doing it because they believe the isolation proves their devotion, and their devotion is what keeps them chosen. The cage is self-built. The lock is self-turned. And the operator never laid a hand on either. Desire is amplified by scarcity. Value is amplified by competition. And loyalty is amplified by the fear that both could be withdrawn. The triangle is not about making the target jealous. It's about making the target understand that the operator's presence is not guaranteed, and that the isolation the target has accepted is the currency that purchases continued access. If you've ever stayed in a relationship that had clearly become destructive because you were afraid the person would find someone else, you felt this. And the reason you couldn't leave wasn't love. It was the triangulation of your fear. You were afraid of being replaced because you had already replaced everyone else with them. Number 7. Affect a regression to the point of childlike dependency. This is the final move, and it's the one that makes the isolation permanent. The operator doesn't just want the target to need them. They want the target to need them the way a child needs a parent. Unconditionally. Helplessly. Without the capacity to imagine survival without them. And they achieve this by regressing the target to an earlier developmental stage. They do it through comfort. Through the removal of responsibility. Through taking care of things the target used to handle alone. The operator starts making decisions. Small ones at first. Where to eat. What movie to watch. Which weekend plans to accept. Then larger ones. How to handle a conflict at work. Whether to take that trip. Whether to keep that friendship that's been feeling complicated. The target, already isolated, already dependent, already stripped of their competing support systems, accepts the help. It feels like care. It feels like being loved. And slowly, without noticing, the target stops making decisions. They defer. They ask. They wait for the operator's input before acting. They lose the muscle of independent judgment, and they don't notice it atrophying because the operator is right there, ready to flex in their place. This is regression. The target has been returned to a childlike state where the operator is the parent. The parent who provides. The parent who decides. The parent whose approval is necessary for the target to feel safe. And in this state, leaving is not just difficult. It is developmentally impossible. A child cannot leave their parent. A child does not have the resources, the emotional infrastructure, the sense of self required to survive alone. And the target, regressed to that state, is no different. They can't leave because they've forgotten how to be a person on their own. The isolation is complete. Not just from other people. From their own autonomy. From their own identity. From the version of themselves that used to exist before the operator entered and slowly, lovingly, methodically dismantled it. Most people think dependency is a character flaw. Strategic people understand that dependency is an engineering outcome. It is built, step by step, through care that functions as control. And the target never sees it, because every step felt like love. Now, let's talk about you. Because everything I've described, you've experienced. Maybe not all 7. Maybe not in sequence. But you've felt the edges of it. You've had a relationship where you slowly stopped seeing your friends and didn't know why. You've had a period where one person became your entire emotional world and the thought of their absence felt like a threat to your survival. You've made yourself smaller, quieter, more agreeable, in order to keep someone's attention. You've abandoned your own preferences in favor of someone else's and called it compromise. You felt the panic of partial withdrawal and reached out harder, faster, more desperately, and told yourself it was passion. It wasn't passion. It was isolation doing what isolation does. And the cost is not just the people you lost. The cost is the version of you that disappeared with them. The confident version. The independent version. The version that made decisions without consulting anyone. The version that had opinions, preferences, a life that was full before someone offered to make it fuller and instead made it narrower. That's what isolation takes from you. It takes you. It leaves a shell that only functions in relation to the person who built the shell. So here's the reversal. Here's how you turn their technique into your weapon. First, you audit your life. Right now. Not tomorrow. Not after you think about it. Right now, in the privacy of your own mind, you look at your relationships and you ask one question. Who have I drifted from since this person entered my life? If the answer is more than one person, the pattern is active. If the answer includes a family member, a close friend, or anyone who used to be important and now feels distant, the isolation is working. Name it. Don't rationalize it. Don't say, "We just grew apart." Don't say life got busy. Don't say it's natural for relationships to change. Those are the stories the strategy depends on. The strategy survives on your reasonable explanations. It dies when you name it for what it is. Second, you rebuild the bridges before you confront the operator. This is critical. Most people, when they realize they've been manipulated, confront the manipulator first. That is a mistake. The confrontation alerts them that you see the pattern, and they will accelerate the isolation in response. They will tighten the grip. They will create a crisis that demands your attention. They will withdraw strategically to trigger your panic and pull you back in. Instead, you quietly reconnect. You text the friend you haven't spoken to in months. You call the family member you drifted from. You rebuild your network in silence, without announcing it, without explaining it, without involving the operator in any way. You restore the infrastructure of your independence before you make any move that could trigger a countermove. Third, you reclaim your decision-making muscle. Start small. Make a choice about something inconsequential without asking for input. Choose where to eat. Choose what to watch. Choose how to spend a free afternoon. And notice the resistance. Notice the pull to defer, to consult, to seek approval. That pull is the regression. It is the child reaching for the parent. You don't break it by fighting it. You break it by acting anyway. By deciding, and surviving the decision, and realizing that you are still whole without permission. Fourth, you learn the strategic use of your own absence. The technique that was used on you, absence as a weapon, is now yours. You withdraw, not to manipulate, but to test. You pull back and you observe what happens. If the person panics, tightens, demands more of you, tries to re-engage the isolation, you have your answer. If the person respects your space, maintains their own life, allows you to exist independently, you have a different answer. The response to your absence tells you everything about the nature of the connection. A healthy connection survives distance. A manufactured dependency collapses without it. Fifth, you become the person who cannot be isolated. This is the ultimate reversal. You build a life so interconnected, so rich with relationships and purposes and identities, that no single person can become your everything. You diversify your emotional portfolio the way a strategic investor diversifies financial risk. If one connection fails, you have others. If one relationship demands too much, you have balance. If one person tries to position themselves as your only option, you have a dozen others who prove them wrong. The person who cannot be isolated is the person who cannot be controlled. And the person who cannot be controlled is the most dangerous person in any room. Sixth, you learn to wield the technique ethically, which means you learn to use it in self-defense and in service of genuine connection. Strategic isolation, used by someone who understands it, can be turned inward. You isolate yourself from toxic influences. You separate yourself from people who drain you, from environments that diminish you, from patterns that keep you small. You create a private world, but one that you control, one that has doors you can open and close at will. You use absence to test the value of your connections, not to manufacture dependency. You use the understanding of regression to protect yourself against it, not to inflict it. The knowledge is neutral. The application defines the ethics. And seventh, you walk alone when necessary. This is where the Stoic composure becomes essential. Marcus Aurelius understood that the ultimate power is the power to be complete within yourself. Not isolated in the toxic sense, but self-sufficient in the strategic sense. When you no longer need anyone to be your everything, you become free to choose who gets to be something. And that choice, made from a position of wholeness rather than hunger, is the most powerful choice a person can make. The operator isolates because they need you to need them. The strategic individual connects because they choose to, not because they must. And that distinction, invisible to most, is the difference between the manipulator and the master. Let me bring this back to where we started. You've been isolated your whole life and you called it love. Someone quietly removed every option except themselves, and you thanked them for it. That happened. It's real. And the cost was you. The version of you that was full before someone offered to complete you and instead consumed you. But now you see it. And seeing it is the first act of reclaiming what was taken. Because the technique only works in the dark. It only functions when the target doesn't understand the mechanism. The moment you can name every step, every trick, every subtle manipulation, the spell breaks. You can't be regressed when you recognize the regression. You can't be isolated when you see the isolation being built. You can't be made dependent when you understand the architecture of dependency. The knowledge is the antidote. And now you have it. Connection is the leash they never see. Isolation is power. But only when you are the one who understands the difference between a bond and a cage. Most people will never see this. They will spend their entire lives being quietly isolated by people who call it love, and they will wonder why they feel empty inside a relationship that looks full from the outside. You will not be one of those people. You will see the triangles. You will recognize the private worlds. You will feel the withdrawal, and instead of chasing, you will observe. You will notice the questions that stir dissatisfaction, and instead of answering, you will ask yourself who benefits from your answer. You will feel the pull of regression, and instead of surrendering to it, you will stand up and make a decision, even a small one, and you will remember that you are not a child. You are not a dependent. You are not a target. You are someone who understands the game, and understanding the game means the game cannot be played on you. And if you choose to play it yourself, if you choose to use these techniques with precision and purpose, you do so with full awareness of their power. You isolate not to destroy, but to protect. You withdraw not to manipulate, but to reveal. You create absence not to manufacture panic, but to test the strength of what claims to be real. You become dangerously clever, which means you become someone who sees through every mask, every maneuver, every quiet attempt to make you smaller than you are. And in doing so, you become untouchable. Not because you are cold. Not because you are closed. But because you are awake. The ruthless art Machiavelli perfected, the strategic isolation of a target until you become their entire world, now you understand it. Now it is yours. The question is not whether you will use it. The question is whether you will allow it to be used on you ever again. Right now, not tomorrow. Right now, audit your life. Name the pattern. Rebuild the bridges. Reclaim the decisions. And if you are ready to declare that you see the game and you will never again be a player on someone else's board, then say it. Write it in the comments. 3 words. I am untouchable. Mean it. And watch what changes when the people around you realize the manipulation has stopped working. They will either rise to meet the person you've become, or they will fade, and the space they leave behind will not be a void. It will be freedom.